Hi everybody, this is Jim Roth from Spokane Community College with a short presentation over a handout or a file you might find in Angel called Editing, Find, and Fix. Before I go through it briefly, the difference between editing and revising is important. Editing is the final cosmetic changes you make to a revised copy before you turn it in or show it to your reader or send it off in email or in the mail. And so editing really is changing out a word or two, checking punctuation, spelling, and the like. It's not any kind of major change. That should be done in revision or revising. So when you revise an essay, it means that you take it through several drafts, like we saw in our viewpoints assignments, where at the end of each draft you might decide to change the order of paragraphs or sentences, add more detail, all sorts of things in revision. There's no sense to edit as you revise because you might end up checking spelling or punctuation for a sentence you decide to throw out later. So it's best just to wait, let it be kind of raw and rough, get all the parts in the sentences right, and then do the editing. Okay, wanted to talk to you just a little bit about a couple, three things to look for when you do edit. And the first one has to do with these things called pronouns. And so let's take a look at that. You've seen them before, you used them a lot. If you remember back to grade school or junior high, or if you don't, there are three persons in English, or three voices, and they are very creatively named first person, second person, and third person. And then there are two numbers. It's either one or more than one, so you don't have to be a math whiz to be a really good writer. First person singular, you have these words, I, me, my, and mine, and the plural is we or us. So if it's you and me together, then it's we. Okay? Second person, both singular and plural are the same, and that's because I could mean you, just one person, like Johanna, would you read question 2, please? Or I could instead say, class, would you all turn to page 42? So in Johanna's case, it's one, and in the class, it's more than one, but it doesn't matter because it's the same word. Third person by far has the most members, any she, any he. So that means of the 7 billion people on Earth, there are 3,500,000,000 she's and the same he's. Countless it's. I look around where I'm recording right now, and I've got glasses case, calculator, book, lamp, cup, printer, window, clock. All of those are third person singular, and they would require an it. Now, if I have two of those, like the clock and the book, then it becomes they. And the problem really comes in where we don't have any singular pronoun to replace male or female. In other words, we have to choose either female or male. We don't have a word that can stand in for both, and that's where we get into some problems. So let's take a look, though. The first problem is shifting persons, and usually what happens is we shift from third to second person. We start writing you in our essays. And most English teachers advise against that. Here you can see the problem. Hard economic times can drive an instructor to risk harassment by begging in front of the lair. Hope that doesn't happen to me. This is unfair because it's really the economy that's to blame if you feel that you are being harassed. So suddenly I went from an instructor, which is a he or she, to you, which is second person. And you can see where this might become a problem. Let's say I'm writing about reformed criminals and how there are lots of opportunities out there, and then I continue the paragraph. So if you want help, you should call. Well, I've just called all my readers reformed criminals, so that's why second person is avoided. Just stay with instructor, he, she, if that's your choice. Okay, which brings us to the next problem. This would be the correct way to write this sentence. Hard economic times can drive an instructor, okay, that's the he or she, to risk harassment by begging in front of the lair. This is unfair because it's really the economy that's to blame. An instructor who feels that he or she is being harassed, that's right, because I have an instructor, which is a he or she, and I replaced it with he or she. So far, so good, okay? So we want to avoid unnecessary shifts in person, right? Going from third to second or from first to second. Typically, we end up starting writing you, and that's where we need to be careful and take a look. Okay, now let's take a look at the second problem, because this happens because we want to be fair, I think, to both sexes. So let's say I write, hard economic times can drive an instructor to risk harassment by begging in front of the lair. This is unfair because it's really the economy that's to blame. If an instructor feels like they are being harassed, they should convince themselves to notify their supervisor so they can find a solution to the problem. Okay, I've thrown in a lot here, and really that sounds pretty good, but the problem is that this word I'm replacing is a singular word, and I'm replacing it with a plural pronoun, okay? Now, before we get hung up on grammar terms, this in fancy grammar talk is called the antecedent. A-N-T-E means before, and cedent, C-E-D-E-N-T, means to go. So it's all it is, an antecedent is the word that goes before the pronoun that the pronoun replaces. Okay, so instructor is the antecedent of these pronouns because they're all trying to replace it. Therein lies the problem, because instructor is just one, but they and themselves replace plurals right here, the third person plural. So now we haven't changed voice or person, but we have changed number. We started instructor here and we jumped into they and them. Okay, so let's take a look. The problem is now if you correct that and if you bring everything into line with the antecedent or the word instructor, watch what happens if you try to honestly fulfill that staying in the same number. Hard economic times can drive instructor to by begging in front of the lair. This is unfair because it's really the economy that's to blame. If an instructor feels like he or she is being harassed, he or she should convince himself or herself to notify supervisor. So what's happening here now, I'm doing it correctly because I have this third person singular antecedent or word I'm replacing, and I'm sure enough doing it with third person pronouns. I'm bludgeoning my reader to death, pounding them into subconscious or unconsciousness, forgive me, because I'm using this his or her, he or she, himself, herself, okay? So a better, if you're going to write just a single sentence and you're only going to replace a singular antecedent once, then it's fine. We can't do this, and we sure can't do this. So what I do when I'm thinking about editing and writing is I always try to start with a plural word that I'm going to replace, never a singular. So instead of instructor, I'll start with instructors if I can. Instead of child, student, I'll go with students. Instead of boss, I'll go with bosses. Always try for the plural to begin because that's going to set the number. Now, to here, watch where I've fixed my problem. Hard economic times can drive instructors, that's more in front of the lair. This is unfair because it's really the economy that's to blame. If instructors feel like they're being harassed, they should convince themselves to notify their supervisor. So everything's great now because instructors is a third person plural, which allows me then to pick from they and them. Okay, so whenever you can, always start with plurals. It's not the natural thing to normally want to should do this, or an instructor should do that, or a boss should do this, or a husband should do that. When you go back and edit, make it a plural if you can, and that way you don't have to worry about using they and them incorrectly. Okay, last thing, when we talk about plural antecedents, or plural any words, we have to be careful about a thing called a sweeping generalization, which means that we inadvertently generalize to every member of a group rather than just many that perhaps we mean. If you take a look at this sentence. It's unfortunate that instructors hate criticism. Now, it sounds okay, and it is okay, but not every instructor hates criticism. All we need to do is find one exception to all the instructors on earth, and this is an incorrect statement. And so you want to avoid this. You also want to avoid what are called qualifiers, words that equal either 0 or 100%. And I'll show you some here. If you take a look at these are words to be careful of because all means 100%, none means 0, everyone means 100, no one 0, always is always 100, and never is 0. Make sure you absolutely mean it. Otherwise, you need to use some more sensible qualifiers, these mid-range qualifiers like this. So I could say many instructors hate criticism, some instructors hate criticism, most hate criticism, often instructors hate criticism, seldom do they as well. So be careful of these plurals, these kind of sweeping plurals that gather everybody in the same pot and tag them, because likely that's not what you mean. Okay, so that about does it for this handout, editing, find, and fix. Again, remember, stay in the same person, always with a plural antecedent or word to replace, like instructors, so you don't have to worry about the using they and their and them. And then finally, be careful of sweeping generalizations. Be careful that you mean everyone in a class before you say that. Talk to you later. Bye.